coming.
No problem. Well, look, great to see everyone. Can
I make a brief comment before?
Okay.
Okay. So thank you very much for being with us in this last week, this time. This is the final session, as I told in March. We are going to have in April other sessions that will be presented very soon in our group. Today we have a very special session because we have with us Peasland. He was really invited him to be here with us to share his experience and his vision in terms of leadership and innovation from Formula One. Al was for some years the director for innovation and for technology in two very important teams, Red Bull and Williams, and he has been also involved in the last years in innovation and leadership. So he's the right person to tell us what he thinks about Formula One being a good practice and a good example for this. Like the other sessions, we'll have 2 moments. I will speak for more or less 30 minutes, and then we have a discussion between us. Al, thank you very much for being with us. It's a great pleasure, and it's an honor to have you with us, and we hope we have a very good session.
Thank you very much. Yes, my pleasure, and thanks for the invitation. I'll do my best to only speak for 30 minutes. I can get carried away, so please just tell me to stop when you're bored. Can I just apologize if there is any background noise? I'm in a co-working office, and they have just decided to have a quiz night. So there's a lot of people near me having alcohol and running a quiz. So apologies if you hear crazy noise in the background. I'll try to talk over it. Thank you for the introduction. I'll get into it a bit more detail about my background in the sport in a few moments, but I thought I'd introduce the talk first and kind of set the scene. So my time in Formula One has given me some insights that are more than just the cars going around the racetrack. It's really around the business of Formula One and what can we learn from the teams that sit behind the scenes that make it all happen. Because we have quite a tech audience, I thought I'd introduce a few slides as well to look at the evolution of technology in the sport as much as the evolution of the sport itself. And so hopefully we'll kind of cover that. About 30 minutes, happy to take questions at the end. I do have some films to play.
Yes, please put it.
I haven't tested to see if they will play over Zoom and get the audio. So if they fail, I'm apologizing now in advance, but hopefully it'll all work. So I think the first thing is to see is where did motorsport begin? Where did it all start? And this is one of the earliest pictures of what is a race, a motor race, a motorsport. It's the advent of the automobile. It's in Paris. It was an endurance race, Paris to Rouen. And it was back in 1894, one of the earliest photographs that we can find of an example of a car race. You can see this is on the main high streets. This is on a public street. There are people going about their daily business, some people walking, some on horse-drawn carriages. And in fact, it was such early days that the racing was then called horseless carriage racing. These were carriages without horses. And it's why we still have terminology to this day that is reminiscent or links back to horse racing. We have the paddock. We have drivers that wear lots of bright clothing to separate themselves out from the competition. So there's still some very, very good links back. But the reason this started was really twofold. The car, the automobile was new. And so the manufacturers wanted to get customer buy-in. They wanted to get people to trust this new technology. And to do that, they needed to show that it had reliability, that it was safe, that it could move them about and offer them benefits. So it was really a product demonstration platform. In addition, by creating a sport, it accelerates development. So the notion of having an endurance race meant that the manufacturers would try to develop their technology quicker than the competition and use the sport as a vehicle for driving innovation. 2 main reasons for motorsport to begin. On a high street, it's clearly not a safe environment. And so racetracks quickly were developed where the racing could happen away from the public high streets Still wasn't very safe back then, but it was safer, certainly for the spectators. And then it quickly becomes a sport, and things start to change with the dynamic of why this is happening. The earliest dates for telemetry as we know it now, data being captured on race cars that we can use to drive further development, was back in the late 70s. And there's different, depending where you Google and where you search, you'll get different dates. The reason I put this picture up is because I was fortunate to spend 3 years working in the Williams racing team. And this is one of their very first race cars that had a data logger fitted to the car. A small data logger that the 5.5-inch floppy disk. None of you on this call are old enough to remember that, but we would capture Sergio, thank you, very kind. It's very honest. 64K of data would be captured. This was largely, if only, power unit engine data, measuring very basic information from the engine itself, because back then it was very much more an engine race than the notion of aerodynamics was just starting. So it took 10 years to get to a data logger that could capture 128K. So now we're getting in the realms of, a smaller floppy disk, a little bit more tech. We would still take 20 minutes to download that data to make it useful and to provide insights for people in the team, and would obviously only happen when the cars returned to the garage from the racetrack. Then we'd plug in and download the data, or probably take the floppy disk out and start to download data. 10 years to move forward from 64K to 128. When I joined the sport at Red Bull Racing in 2005, we were already up to 4 gigabytes of data over a race weekend. So exponentially, that amount of data have grown. In fact, from 2000 to 2005, we went from 500 megabytes or so over a race weekend to 4 gigabytes. Starting to get really meaningful data now. This isn't just power unit. This is pressure sensors around the floor of the car. This is measuring loads, temperatures, tire pressures, you name it. If we could get a sensor on it, we would measure it. Back in 2005, cars with maybe about 400 or 500 sensors on them, capturing that data. We're now in the realms of 1,000 sensors on a car. At least I think at Williams there was at least 500 sensors on a car measuring 1,000 lines of telemetry. So when we roll the clock forwards to modern day, we're now dealing with terabytes of data over a race weekend being shared between the racetrack and the factory real time, where we can have engineers in the UK at any of the team's headquarters monitoring the cars on the track real time, analyzing that data, using that data to drive simulation and provide greater insight back to the race teams who could be on the other side of the world. In fact, one of the key partners that I worked with for many years at Red Bull Racing was AT&T. They provided our global EVPN network, so the network between, the MPLS network between the racetrack and the factory. They would arrive at the racetrack a week in advance. They would set up a temporary point of presence in the Red Bull Racing's garage. We would then connect our infrastructure to that on a race weekend. And if we were somewhere like Melbourne, 14,000 kilometers from the UK's headquarters, we would have data off car on screens in the UK in less than half a second, about 300 milliseconds. The biggest part of that was getting the data from the car to the garage over RF. From that point, it would be, over the AT&T network, secure, resilient, robust, back to the UK, where we could then run simulation real time. And so, from in quite a short space of time, from having 64K on a little floppy disk, we're now dealing with very big data, certainly in terms of motorsport, perhaps not in some of your industries, but certainly in motorsport, it's big data. You'll see from this slide, though, the sport is now far more than just developing technology and winning over customers, convincing them to buy it. It's now an entertainment platform. It's now a sporting platform. People bet, people gamble, people invest in this sport. It isn't just to sell product. And when you look at the sport of Formula One now, you've got close to 1 billion people watching the sport throughout the season. There are at least 80 million people will watch a Formula One Grand Prix. And this is happening every 2 weeks of the year on average. In fact, the only sports that rival Formula One for viewing audience is the FIFA World Cup and the Olympics. And they happen every 4 years. This is Formula One happens every 2 weeks. So it is a huge global platform, which is then why you see such big brands, such big organizations sponsoring into, I think someone's just won the quiz, sponsoring into the sport and using it as a platform to elevate their brand. Over 770 drivers have been in the sport since its conception, I'm talking F1 only. 34 world champions, thereabouts. This slide might be a year or two old. There have been more people flown into outer space than have won a Formula One Grand Prix in the history of Formula One. It is a rare club to be a Formula One race winner. It shows how exclusive this sport is in terms of being able to get to the top. And yeah, that's what we're dealing with. But the technology doesn't stop. And in fact, I was involved for a period of time in an organization developing autonomous race cars. A company called RoboRace doesn't really exist now, but they were using the racing platform as a place to test autonomous self-driving cars, to put them to their limits, to push them to extreme limits. Again, to really convince the consumer that this is safe technology, that this can cope with quite extreme situations and gain that consumer buy-in. So that notion of motorsport and the sporting platform serves a purpose. It serves a purpose to drive innovation, to create competition, to create to accelerate that development. To get a little bit more detail into the tech itself, we would look at a Formula One car. It's probably easier to consider a Formula One car as an upside down aircraft than a car as we know it. Essentially, it's designed to generate downforce, the opposite of lift. So as it speeds up, it gets heavier, just by virtue of the aerodynamic shape of the car, creating a low pressure underneath and a high pressure above. The cars all look fairly similar, but the teams do a great job every year of working within the confines of the regulations, but finding ways that they can develop something different to the competition, get that edge. But the edge, the competitive edge, is so small, the margins are so fine that you have to get incredibly creative to do something the competition haven't spotted. And when you look at these vehicles themselves, just the stats alone around these vehicles are impressive. Think of a Formula One car with the driver inside weighs 100 kilos less than a smart car. So a very small, tiny car that you can put in your pocket once you've parked up, that weighs 100 kilos more than a Formula One car with a driver sitting in it. So they're incredibly light, but they're also phenomenally strong. And then you imagine that smart car has 1,000 horsepower in the back. So an incredibly powerful, very responsive power unit. And then when you take that smart car to top speed, it has a baby elephant sitting on top in terms of its weight, pushing it down onto the road. So these cars are not only very light, but they're able to stick to the road. It's why they can navigate racetracks so quickly. In fact, we don't say a Formula One car turns a corner, it changes direction. It can change direction so violently because of the grip and the downforce, and it's vehicle dynamics that it's violent, and they literally do change direction, generating G-force in excess of 5G laterally on drivers as they go around corners. So an incredibly powerful, lightweight, sophisticated piece of technology. And I'd say I'm a mechanical design engineer by trade. So design engineering is my thing. That's where I started. And, I look at these vehicles and you see, as a sport, I don't think there is another sport on the planet that has that level of technology involved. All sport has technology, regardless, golf, tennis, they all have technology that makes a difference to the outcome. But no other sport has technology to this level of complexity, with a Formula One car here that looks like could be easily worth £4 or £5 million. Very hard to put a price on an F1 car, but but you're in that region. It's millions of pounds worth of technology being, raced around a racetrack every weekend. That's the intro to sport. I'll get into my lessons from the sport in a moment, but I should also perhaps introduce myself a little bit better. So I looked, if we've gone back to the first picture of a race, a motor race, then we should probably find an early picture of me just to set the scene. So I managed to find this early picture of me, only chosen because it has a car and it has Lego, which kind of represents the engineer within me. So you'll be glad to know that I didn't get involved in fashion or interior design. That wasn't my inspiration from this picture, but I loved Lego, and I got into cars later on, and so engineering was clearly a route for me. Roll the clock forwards a little bit to my last race with Red Bull Racing. So I started at Red Bull Racing in the very early days of the team. The team existed as Jaguar Racing and then was bought by Red Bull in 2004. And I joined the team around that time. I'd actually been working in the Jaguar Racing team as a consultant, so I'd seen Red Bull come in from the very beginning. And I worked 11 years with Red Bull Racing, starting in IT, looking after all of their CAD and PLM systems, so managing the software that the design engineers used to develop the car. And after about half of my time there, about 5 years, 6 years, I moved into the marketing team, managing all of the technology sponsors for Red Bull Racing. So as the engineer, I could understand the technology, I could speak the language of tech. And so I became the engineer within marketing. And most of my sponsors were technology sponsors. So whether it was, connectivity, whether it was, IBM, HP providing data center and, cloud compute for us, or whether it was IBM platform computing providing simulation, whatever it might be, the partners I managed were all technology based, bringing something to the team that we couldn't do in-house and giving us a competitive advantage. And during those 11 years with Red Bull Racing, we went from 6th and 7th place in the Constructors' Championship, so almost back of the grid, to 4 times double world champions. Sebastian Vettel winning the Drivers' World Championship 4 years in succession, and the Constructors' Championship for the team at the same time. So very proud to have seen the team from the beginning to 4 times world champions. And it's the lessons that I have taken from that I wanted to cover, really. So I've kind of introduced the sport, but my take on this is, if you think about a 100-meter sprinter in the Olympics and you see them race down the racetrack and it's 10 seconds and they win the world, they win the Olympic championship, the gold medal. The years and years and years of work that went into that, the training, the effort they put in, and we just see the 10-second race. If you play that into motorsport, we see the 2-hour race Grand Prix at the weekend. What we don't see is the work that goes on behind the scenes to get there. And that's what I wanted to kind of expose today and lift the covers on today. So it's the business of F1 that I think we can all take some lessons from, regardless of our sector, our industry, and what our roles are. Most people, when we talk about F1, think of the drivers. Most people think it's a driver race. They're the athletes, they're the heroes of the story. And certainly this picture here is a iconic one. It's on my wall in my office at home. This is Sebastian Vettel winning his 3rd world championship, getting out of the car after destroying the tires, doing some donuts at the end of the track, at the end of the race, getting fined for doing that, by the way. He shouldn't have got out of the car. I think he got a €25,000 fine for doing that. But hey, we've won the championship. We don't care. But what I like about this picture is he's bowing down to the technology. He's thanking the vehicle and in turn thanking the team, because without the car, he wouldn't have moved off the grid. So it's definitely man and machine. And if we think of horse racing before the car evolved, that was man and horse, or person and horse. So this is humans connecting with technology, delivering world-class results. But it's not just a driver competition. If you watch a bit more of the sport, you start to see that there are more people involved. A Formula One team have a limit of taking 60 people to the racetrack. And they all have jobs to do. They all have functions. They all have a part to play. So it's not just the drivers. There are at least 60 people in every team at every race. Actually, there are more than that trackside, because people in marketing and security and catering don't fall into that criteria. So Red Bull would probably have close to 100 people trackside. at every race. So that's 1,000 people with 10 teams in the sport. That's 1,000 people trackside to have 20 cars going around a racetrack. It's quite an undertaking. It's a big team to get together and keep focused. But actually, it's not just the team trackside, because at Red Bull Racing, when I worked there was well over 1,000 people in the racing team. So there are 100 people trackside. There are 900 people back in the UK that never go traveling, that never go to the races, that are there to create, design, build, and develop a race car. 1,000 people in most teams delivering 2 cars to a racetrack. So the challenge then is, how do we get 1,000 people to work on one product and develop it and make it the best product they can? How do we get them to stay together as a team? And that's where my lessons start. So these are my must-haves. These are the things I've taken away from my time in motorsport. I'm not saying that this is an exclusive list to delivering high-performance teamwork. There are many other things involved, but to get this into 30 minutes, these are my headline items. The first is to have a clear mission, to know exactly what the company is here to deliver. And the mission needs to be simple, because every one of those 1,000 people need to know it. They need to remember it. They need to be able to recite it. They need to live and breathe that mission. That is why they go to work. I ask every time I do this keynote like this to a big audience, I always ask them to put their hands up in the audience if they know their company's mission statement. And you'd probably be unsurprised to know that very few hands are raised. Most people couldn't tell you what their employer's mission statement is, but that's why they go to work. That's what they're employed to deliver on. So making sure your teams know exactly what the mission is key. It sounds really simple, but you'd be surprised how few people in an organization actually know that. They will have many other reasons why they go to work, but the company's mission is the priority. So we make sure that everyone knows what the mission is. Once we have that, the next thing then is to decide, what culture do you want to develop within your organization? And I often find that people think culture is something that just happens, and they either enjoy the culture of a company or they don't. For me, I firmly believe that culture is developed by every individual in the organization. We all can influence it. We can all have a part to play. Of course, the more senior the role, perhaps the more influence and direction you have on company culture. It starts from the top. Great role models in leadership positions, but everyone can have a part to play. For motorsport, and I imagine a lot of companies that you're representing on this call, a big part of culture is innovation. We want to be creative. We have to be first to market with new ideas. We need to lead the way. To do that, you have to have people in your organization that embrace innovation and that want to do new things and want to be creative and create an environment that enables that. And we'll cover that a bit more in a moment. But innovation, that culture, that push boundaries is key. I'm hoping this video will now play. There is no audio, so don't panic. The beauty of motorsport is there is a lot of high-speed footage that is played out on the TV channels that we get to see as a race team. So, for example, if our competitor team, Ferrari, the red team, are going around a corner faster than we are, maybe there is information that we can glean from this high-speed footage that understand what are they doing differently. From this picture alone, we could reverse engineer and redesign their front wing. We could capture the information from this to understand what suspension geometry they have, what tire pressures they are running, what suspension stiffness they have. We could, with the information we know from just watching the footage, we could almost redesign their car and try to understand what are they doing differently to us. It's basically monitoring the competition. It's looking at your competitor landscape and seeing what are your competitors doing that is giving them an edge over you. Is there something you can learn from that? Maybe something you could steal from them, an idea you could borrow. But I always say, if you follow the competition on the racetrack, if you follow the competition in design, you'll follow them on the racetrack. Copying their design just means you're going to be 2 races behind them when you get that idea on your race car. They've already won the race and they're already on to their next idea. So it's great to understand the landscape, the competitor landscape. What are your competition doing that's different to you? But at some point, you have to come up with your own ideas. You have to be brave enough to put new designs out into the marketplace. For us as a race team, the marketplace is the racetrack on a Sunday. But for everyone else, it may be the products you're selling to your sector. So yeah, monitor the competition, but definitely have an eye on what are you doing differently. If you want to innovate, the next thing is you need to build that team spirit. We always would talk about win as a team, learn as a team. We stick together. And the reason I have this picture on here, not for vanity, because I really like Daniel Ricciardo. I particularly like champagne. That's really why this picture's on here. And that's why I moved from engineering to marketing, by the way, because you get to drink more champagne in marketing. The reason I have this picture on here is because I will only let you stand by my side and drink the champagne when we win, if you're prepared to stand by my side when it goes wrong. You cannot have it both ways. You have to be a team player when it's good times and bad times. You can't pick and choose. That is not teamwork. And so to do that, you then need to foster a culture of no blame. Because if I start blaming someone for when it goes wrong, we are singling out individuals for failure. And that is not how we encourage innovation. The moment you punish someone for getting it wrong, if they get it wrong with all the right intention, they're trying to innovate, they're being creative, they want to push boundaries, they want to come up with new ideas. If it goes wrong and you blame them, they will stop innovating. It's the quickest way to stifle innovation, because then they don't want to take the risk anymore. So you have to have a no blame culture, no pointing the finger of blame, and you have to stick together when it goes wrong and foster that team spirit. Win as a team, learn as a team. And of course, you get plenty of opportunity to learn as a team in motorsport, because things go wrong frequently and sometimes spectacularly. There's no audio on this again, but a great example of pushing boundaries. And again, I don't know if this video is playing out, but the Toro Rosso team here with the two wheels flying off was an example of the team pushing the design to the limits, and actually, unfortunately, pushing the design beyond the limits, which is why we had a catastrophic failure on both sides of the car at the same time. That is simply the aerodynamic load increasing as the car speeds up to the point where the suspension fails. Obviously, not the result you want, and not how you want to design your car, but there were a lot of lessons to learn from that. An opportunity to go even worse is, when your whole world turns upside down and you decide to destroy an entire car, and then, not content with that, you throw a €30,000 steering wheel that was okay out of the car in a fit of temper. Great opportunity to learn from that. In fact, a great example of the technology evolution in motorsport. Mark Webber, who crashed that car, was fit and healthy and safe to race again. He said that if that had been 10 years earlier, not only would we have been building and looking for a new car, we'd have also been looking to recruit a new driver. He didn't think he would have survived. So it shows how incredibly strong these cars are now. And that's material science, that's manufacturing advances over the years. So once we have this no blame culture and we learn from our mistakes and learn from when things go wrong, the next thing we need to do is check in on everyone. Make sure everyone's still on the same page. They learned the mission, but do they still know the mission? Has the mission changed? I don't know how often you in your organizations get to speak to your entire workforce and have a state of the nation or a town hall where everyone gets briefed on how is things going with the organization. I've worked in the aerospace industry where that would happen once a year, once every 12 months. I've worked in organizations where it's more frequent, but in motorsport, in a Formula One team, in the two teams I've worked, Williams and Red Bull Racing, we would have a town hall, an all hands meeting with all 1,000 people in the team after every single race. That's over 20 times a year. We would be speaking to the entire workforce, rebriefing, realigning, and making sure everyone is on the same page, knowing what we're here to achieve, knowing what we're doing for the next race. When you think of how competitive this sport is, to take an hour of everyone's time, essentially lose, in this picture, you are losing at least 400 hours of work that week out of the business to brief everyone in a big town hall. The team knows that that is an expense worth taking. That the benefit of having everyone aligned is worth that effort. And so we would brief the team after every single race and get everyone back on the same page, knowing what we're doing as a team, working together as one team on one mission. Then you need to get a mindset. So now everyone's briefed, we're all learning from our mistakes, we're all together as a culture. Now we want to foster a mindset where people want to do things better. How do we continually improve? And most importantly, how can we use data to drive that decision making? Making decisions based on data, not instinct or gut feel, is how you win races. It's how you develop the business in a scientific way, using that data to make strategic decisions, to make design decisions. So important. And the reason and how we get people to do that is we give them a really good reason why. It's always a challenge to ask someone to continually redesign a Formula One race car, to constantly make it better. It gets quite tiring, it gets fatiguing. This is a great example of why we would do that. So this shows I'm an engineer. This is the only technical slide I will show you today. This is a particular Formula One season. So let's pretend this season had 20 races. And if you start from the left-hand side to the right-hand and travel across to the right-hand side, every bend on the line is a race weekend. And what we've actually done here, if the blue line is the Red Bull Racing team, we've compared our fastest lap around that racetrack with our closest rivals. So the blue line is Red Bull Racing, the red line is Ferrari, and the white line is the Silver Arrows, Mercedes, the two closest rivals that season. You can see for most of the season, we had the fastest race car. And actually that season, we won the World Championship. So by the end of the season, we had a race-winning, championship-winning car. If we look at the dotted blue line, this is the performance of the car that we predict we would have had we not developed it throughout the season, had we not redesigned parts of the car and continually improved its overall performance. We would have slowly slipped back in performance compared to our rivals. By the end of the season, we would have been 1 second per lap slower than the competition. 1 second a lap slower is an entire minute, 60 seconds behind the race-winning car. That's a different sport. You're in a different formula. We are being lapped at the last race. So that's 1 second a lap doesn't sound a lot, but it's a lifetime in motorsport. It's the difference between first and last place in some races. That 1 second a lap, though, required over 30,000 design changes to a Formula One car. A Formula One car which only has 7,000 unique designs to begin with. So numerically, from the first race to the last race that season, we have redesigned the Formula One car 4 times over, numerically. Some parts we've designed over and over and over again, so you count them up. But that is the level of continuous improvement needed to get your car to the World Championship level, because everyone else is doing it. The competition are constantly evolving as well. And that was the message that we would share with the team. If 30,000 design changes gave us 1 second a lap improvement, what did one design change do? Its contribution is so small, it almost can't be measured. But yet everyone still made those design changes happen. No designer in Red Bull Racing would have said, I'm not going to make any more design changes because I can't measure the improvement, it's so small. They know that their one design change adds up. It all contributes to an overall performance. It's teamwork. It's everyone playing a little part, a small part to the overall team success. And that's the kind of story that we would communicate to the team, to give them the reason why, give them that drive to continually improve. Once they have a reason why, we then add the science behind it. What direction do we take the development? Well, this is why we now are talking terabytes of data, because we use that data on every race weekend to drive the development forward, to give us the direction we need. But without the culture, without the overall mission, and without the right environment that kind of promotes innovation, the data won't help. You still need the people to put it into action, to have the drive and the motivation. And that's where the real teamwork, that's where the leadership piece comes in. All the data in the world's great, but it just sits on a data center unless you have the will to use it and apply it. And I am conscious that I'm running over time, but I did want to give you an example of teamwork in action. The whole notion of human performance coming together with technology advances playing out as an impressive feat of teamwork. And so the pit stop is obviously the best example. And up until the end of last year, I was fortunate to have worked in the two teams that between them have shared the world record pit stop over the last 10 years. Unfortunately, McLaren now have the world record pit stop, and I haven't worked there. But up until last year, so I think I can hear someone else speaking. I don't know whether we can mute anyone. But yeah, up until last year, I'd worked for Red Bull Racing and Williams Racing, who had kind of bounced the pit stop, the world record pit stop between them. So let's go on a little journey really briefly, if you'll bear with me. First thing with pit stops is we need to know that it doesn't happen by accident. There's an awful lot of practice to bring this kind of feat of technology and engineering and teamwork together. You have, in this picture, you have over 20 people who are working together seamlessly to change all four wheels on the car in as fast a time as possible, or shortest time as possible. Bearing in mind, this is on a Sunday afternoon, usually, at a race weekend, where they have already worked 60 or 70 hours that week as mechanics, composite technicians, IT. They all have jobs to do at the racetrack, as well as become the pit crew. So they're fatigued, they are exhausted, they've traveled around the world. They are in front of 80 million people watching them on TV, so there is a lot of pressure watching them work. And they are probably in a very hot environment somewhere in the world, wearing fireproof overalls, crash helmets with limited visibility. Everything is stacked against them, delivering a really world-class performance. And yet they're able to change the tires on this car in a race on average 2.5 seconds. Now the world record is below 2 seconds. It is quite astonishing. So some of my own video footage, again, hopefully this will play out, is in Singapore, seeing the race team just practice pit stops, getting into position. I want you to watch, if this video does play, I want you to watch them as they get into position to see if anyone runs into someone else or they bump into each other. Just see how well organized this is. We don't appear to have sound for some reason, but hopefully we can try and figure that out for the next one and see if I can make that work. It's seamless and it is well rehearsed. It's not just about changing the wheels. The entire process has to be practiced and analyzed and improved. Trust me, this team are constantly trying to find ways of improving this tomorrow, making it better tomorrow than they did today. As the Red Bull Racing team, the Williams Racing team, back of the grid this year, not winning, this particular season, not winning any points, but still having a lot of fun practicing pit stops, trying to improve their performance. Unfortunately, I'm not sure why the audio wasn't playing, so apologies. But the reason I'm panning the camera is because, can you hear this? Oh, you can? Oh, I can't hear anything, so I'll be quiet. The reason I couldn't bring the camera is because the crowd were enjoying the show of seeing the Williams team change the tyres so much that that was more entertaining than seeing the tyres change. Check the end of this picture though. We've got mechanics, engineers here who are full of smiles, having fun, living the dream. They are at a race weekend where they could pretty much guarantee they're not going to score a point. They know they're not going to win the race. They just know the team performance, the car performance just is not competitive, but yet they're still having fun. That's the team spirit. That's the culture that you're able to foster with the right leadership to bring something to the team that they can have fun around, even when they're not winning races. Where else can we have fun? Where else can we win? I'm going to take you on a quick journey and then I will stop for questions. But okay. This is 2013, the last couple of slides. This is the start of the season, Malaysia. I think it's the second race. We have Mark Webber on track. And during that race, he gets the new world record pit stop. In 2013, it was 2.05 seconds.
Interactive service along with Felipe Massa and Kimi Räikkönen as the race leader. Mark Webber now hands the race lead over to his teammate Sebastian Vettel and makes his second pit stop of this race. And
great teamwork,
like
2.05
tidy as well.
Great.
Unfortunately, it doesn't always go according to plan. So we move forwards a few races. The same year, 2013, we're now in Germany. And unfortunately, on this race, it doesn't quite go to plan. If you watch the bottom left corner of your screen.
Like Alonso, Hulkenberg, Button.
So Mark Webber now stops into the pits. You can ride on board with both
long
Mercedes or both Red Bulls. It is a long stop and there's a bit of wheel spin as he gets away and he's been waved. There's a wheel gone and a wheel rolling down and he's hit the cameraman on the back.
Best outcome. The poor cameraman broke his collarbone. You know, getting hit by a Formula One wheel, it's quite heavy. There's a lot of energy in that. The problem there was that Stewie, friend of mine, Stuart or Stewie, is on the wheel gun on that rear wheel, and the nut gets jammed, gets stuck. Unfortunately, a lot of things happened that told the driver, that Mark Webber, that it was good to go. So the wheel nut got jammed. He's trying to undo that to replace it, but everyone else thinks the car is ready. So the jacks drop, the car drops to its wheels, and off Paul drives Mark Webber. Stewie was in the back of the garage after that. He's in tears. He feels like he's let the team down. He's, you know, the race is over for Mark. He's, you know, we've lost the race. Someone's been injured. So he feels very responsible that it's his fault. There's a big inquiry. That's Sunday afternoon. Monday morning, we are redesigning wheel nuts, the wheel guns that we used to put the wheel nuts on, the axles on the car. We're redesigning the process, the systems, the electronic systems that allowed the green lights to come on when it wasn't safe to do so. We introduced more people to the pit crew to act as observers and spotters to keep an eye on things. Huge redesign, huge load of effort to correct and design out that problem for the very next race. Everything changed. And now I'm not saying that it's just the lessons from this mistake that contributed to success later on in the season, but it definitely had a part to play, because when we moved towards the end of the season, the same year, Austin Grand Prix 2013, we set a new world record, the first ever sub 2-second pit stop, also on Mark Webber's car. This is what it's like.
Okay. Yes, hello.
Can you still see me?
Okay. Yes, okay.
Let me.
So Hal, can we now start with the? So thank you very much for your lesson. It was a really lesson about leadership, innovation, and technology. And as I told you, now we are having open discussion between the participants. The idea is that we can have groups of 3, 4 comments, and then you can going on in terms of discussion. I will invite Ana Paula Reis, that usually is with us. She is very involved in innovation and IT techs. And I think she can make a brief comment or any question, then I will pass for other people, okay? If you want to make some question, please put the hand on to your pleasure.
Thank you, Jaime. Thank you. So thank you all very much for your lesson, really. I would say that competition is a very unusual place to think that it's a winner-take-all market. But if we look at the latest Red Bull achievements, it's, I mean, amazing, right? Looking at last year's championship, you won 21 out of 23. One was cancelled, right? Yeah. Red Bull's winning all through this year. What's really the reason? Because innovation, it was a major lesson that you gave us, but I can imagine that the brands that we are talking about, your competitors that we are talking about, do sort of the same work with the same sort of quality. So there must be something out from the other side of the curtain. If you could let us just pip in your view on why is that? That's one question, because that's very intriguing for me. Sometimes you generally have the same number or 3 or 4 big, but not as consistent as Red Bull is, which is unbelievable. And the other is, you mentioned the need for change, and I would like to know, how can you keep that spirit of need for change consistently, particularly under such a winning period and vibe? That's basically that. And thank you so much.
No, pleasure. Thank you. And sorry.
Can we organize 2 or more questions? I don't know. We have here with us Anjo Ramalho, that is a manager of a well-known Portuguese company that deals with mobility and things like that. Anjo, do you want to make some comment or some questions?
Jaime, I entered too late. Sorry, I entered too late in your meeting. I just assisted to the last few minutes of this intervention, and wonderful, but no questions for now. I will come back.
Okay, José Carlos Caldeira, do you want to make some comment or some question? You are also involved in innovation technology. He is the responsible for a very well-known center of competence that is in SKT. Do you want to make some comment or some question to all, please?
Well, maybe two short questions.
Yes.
One, how important is for driving this innovation, the company knowing where it wants to go in the next 2, 3, 5 years? Because everybody says you need to define a mid to long-term vision, whatever mid to long-term means in business, because it's different from sector to sector. But on the other side, on the other hand, things are changing so fast that does it still make sense to have that vision, that mid long-term vision, or is more on an improvisation or improvising, continuously changing, adapting to the circumstances, the market, the world, and particularly the technology? And so that goes to the second question: is how can we deal today? How can companies deal today with such an immense, diverse set of technologies being developed in so many places in the world, so fast, and with so shorter timelines? So how can companies deal with this complexity?
Okay. And the final topic, Rui Dias Ferreira, you are also involved in entrepreneurship, and I think you know very well Formula 1. Do you want to make some comments, some question to all, please?
Thank you, Jaime, and thank you all for this incredible lesson. Well, I was a big fan of Formula 1, so I was a kid in the old 70s, my Ronnie Peterson and these guys. And I also worked with Accenture in the exact moment where they have a partnership with Williams. I believe you are in Williams at that time, so it was very interesting. Well, since you are moving to marketing, one question that I want you to comment is this movement of Netflix, the impact of Netflix and this series on the incredible winning of audiences worldwide, especially in US. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to make some comment to these first three topics, please?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for the great questions. There's some big questions. I'll try to be brief and cover them all.
No, we have time. Be available.
The motivation question to begin with, you know, particularly when you're asking people to continually develop, continually improve. It was the one thing that stood out to me when I joined the Formula One teams was the mindset of constantly making changes. Think about this, that when the car was on track in February for the very first test event, it has components on that car that haven't yet moved. The car hasn't turned a wheel on track. They could be version 3 of that design. Version 2 is version 1 of the design. Version 2 is already on a machine being manufactured, and version 3 is already on the designer's workstation. We haven't got results from version 1 yet, but the designers have already continually iterated that design. It's kind of a mindset you're trying to get people to convince them that this is just how we win races. One of the ways we found of doing that was find lots of small victories. So if you ask someone to do 30,000 design changes over a 12-month period and then hope that they get a championship trophy at the end, you may struggle to keep them motivated. So what we would always do is find small victories, ways we can win more frequently. So celebrating the little wins more frequently is a way of keeping that motivation going. Most important when you're not winning races. So I found that this was so much more, it was so much more important when I was at the Williams racing team, because then, unfortunately, it was a period of very little success on track. You know, one of the most successful teams in the sport, but when I was there, and it wasn't my fault, they weren't winning races. So to try and keep the team motivated when they're not winning on track, that's even more difficult. So we had to find other ways they could win. And no surprise that even though they weren't winning races, they were still winning world record pit stop performance. They were finding motivation elsewhere, other areas they could still be the best. And that's the leader's job, to find those areas that we can celebrate. We celebrated with prizes and gifts when we completed a certain amount of procurement one month, to hit some procurement targets, to bring some new suppliers and new technology into the Williams team. Everyone that was involved were given well done, congratulatory gifts. So finding ways you can win, if it's not the big race, what else can we celebrate victory? And I think that's one of the ways of keeping that motivation alive. But you have to be mindful, you have to give people respite. You know, people will fatigue, even if you're drinking champagne every weekend. That gets boring after a while. The secret sauce for Red Bull, I think, is kind of summarizing your question. How are they doing it? I think if I could tell you that, if I knew the answer, then I would sell that to all the other teams, and I would be talking to you from a Caribbean island right now. I think the magic is in being able to do everything well. You know, there are so many variables in winning a Grand Prix and winning a championship. It's not just about having the fastest car or having the biggest investment, or, there's so many elements to it. Their attention to detail, their continuity of people is important. Formula One is notorious for people moving teams to gain promotion. It's quite incestuous. I could go and work in 6 different Formula One teams right now and not have to think about relocating. So we're very fortunate in the UK, we have it all in one place. And so keeping staff, retaining your people is a great way of slowly building up that high performance teamwork. And for me, a high performing team is one that they might be great at pit stops, but that's something they do over and over again. If I could take the Red Bull Racing pit crew and put them in an entirely different environment with a challenge they'd never done before, I could guarantee they would still have a great outcome, because as a team, as a unit, they work brilliantly together, and you need continuity of staff to do that, the same people. So Stewie, who was in 2013 on the car that had the problem with the wheel, is still in the pit crew now, winning world record pit stops. So the one thing they didn't change was the people in the team when it went wrong. So I think that's part of Red Bull's secret, is continuity of staff and then attention to detail in every single area. They get strategy decisions right most of the time. Their pit stops are correct most of the time. I had a bad weekend last weekend with a problem, mechanical failure with the car, the first one in 2 years in the sport. That's quite something, you know, that's quite exceptional. So I think that's probably it. But if I had a better answer, then I would bottle that and sell that to lots of others. The vision, how important is vision? I think it's having that overall vision of where we're trying to get to, but yet with the ability to be very agile and reactive. So knowing that we need to deliver 30,000 design changes and scaling a business to be able to cope with that is great. But then when it goes wrong on a race weekend and you suddenly have new things to design, to introduce, you have to be able to react to those and be agile. So having a plan is great, but you need a plan that you can adapt and you can change and you can recommunicate. So I think the vision is more, how do we want to operate as an organization? What is our overriding culture? What is our overriding approach to challenge, to problems, to things? Not necessarily where is the business going? What is our new technology? I mean, you're in different industries. Your timelines for things may be very different. We're in a, you know, Formula One is a sport where it's happening every 2 weeks, so you need to quickly change direction more frequently. But I think it's trying to get that balance with having a clear goal, a clear direction, making sure everyone's aligned to that North Star, but then letting people know that we need to be agile and react, and we may need to take turns off the beat, you know, off the main road every now and then to get there. I don't know if that's a great answer, but that's kind of how we have to be. I think as a race team, that's the approach. So I'd say probably the summary is it's more having a clear approach than necessarily that vision. I think it's how are we going to approach any problem that we face? What is our culture? How do we make it work together is the key. Keeping up with new technology. I think the interesting thing with motorsport is whilst it looks like they're developing lots of technology, often they're stealing it from other places. So I think the real magic of a Formula One team and the magic of any great engineer is being able to think very laterally around a problem. When you think of how strict the regulations are, the technical regulations for an F1 team are, to have any competitive advantage means you have to get very creative to find new ideas that are still compliant in these very strict regulations. So actually, the stricter the regulation, the more creative you need to be. And I think that's the secret, you know, the teams that can get very creative. A great example from my time in Red Bull was the fact that we would work with IBM Platform Computing, that was technology used in the banking sector, and a lot of you on this call probably know better than me, Monte Carlo simulation, being able to perform millions and millions of what-if scenarios in the finance sector. We took that technology and we applied it to drive our race strategy software. So we had in-house designed race strategy software. We would use Monte Carlo simulation and high-performance compute to run millions and millions of what-if scenarios before the race even began. So we would have millions of plan Bs. So if the first corner, our car picked up a puncture, or the car in front had a crash, or any number of things happened, we had plan B to put into action that we'd already run through simulation. And so stealing or borrowing or learning from technology outside of our sector was a way that we could bring in competitive advantage. Most technology in F1 is taken from the aerospace or lots of different sectors. The sport just then uses it to develop it more quickly. Anti-lock braking is from aerospace, not from motorsport. Carbon brake discs is from aerospace, not motorsport. I could go on. So it's being able to think laterally, I think, is how you can deal with that. But coping with the volume of new technology, I think that comes back to mindset again. That comes back to building this resilient mindset, people that embrace new technology, that are constantly looking for change and not frightened of change. They say people aren't frightened of change, they're frightened of loss. So it's not you know, if I was to say I'm going to change your bank balance by 10 million tomorrow, you wouldn't be too worried about that. But if the change comes with a loss, then that's when it's a problem. So make sure the change sounds positive, and then you'll get people on board quite easily. Netflix, my favorite subject, takes me into the marketing world. Netflix brought a whole new viewpoint to the motorsport. I've lost count of the number of fans that I've spoken to who now only follow the sport because they watched Drive to Survive on Netflix. They were never interested in the sport before. So Netflix was able to show a different perspective of the sport, bring in an entirely new cohort of fans, reach a new audience that got to see something that they didn't see otherwise with cars just racing around a racetrack. For me, being in the sport, and the reason I loved the sport, was all of the stories that Netflix now shows. Until Netflix existed, I couldn't really share those. It was difficult to communicate to other people what those stories were. Now you all get to see it through a very, very well-produced program with Netflix, and that's totally changed the sport. I'd also say, though, that Liberty Media buying the sport, changing how the sport was presented as an entertainment platform, opening up removing the restrictions on the teams in what content they could create and share, allowing them to be ambassadors more for the sport and promote it more on their channels was a massive change for the sport, brought in a lot more fans. So yeah, the Netflix thing has been brilliant for the sport, and no surprise that lots of other sports are also following suit with Netflix, golf and, you know, PGA Tour and, you know, tennis, etc.
Okay. So we go to a second round. I would invite maybe José Castro. Do you want to make some comments, José? João Castro, sorry, I was speaking about João.
Okay, thank you, Jaime. I actually have a thought here when you talk about teams and all the different people that are involved in the team. And as a sport, it ended up being that the pilots have a lot of the protagonism, right? The drivers. But mainly the difference seems to come behind the cars that they get to drive. So public perception, and I tried to make the analogy with teams and how then you look at different teams and you look at, oh, maybe the CEO or the executive team, they led this the success of the company. How much that plays or creates tension behind Formula One teams?
Okay, that's perfect. Now we have also with us Sérgio, that is the responsible for innovation in the tourism of Portugal. Do you want to make some comments, some question to all?
Yeah.
Sérgio, please.
Just yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on the presentation. Really loved it. And my question / comment is regarding. I love the detail that you showed about studying competitors. So how deep do actually that is important for driving your future as a company, looking at that? And I love the detail of going to a small detail of your competitor. Thank you.
Okay, and finally, we have also Karina Oliveira. She is also with us. Do you want to make some comments, some question to all, please? Karina, I don't know if you are listening. Okay, if she's not listening, maybe I can ask eventually. We don't have other people that are making questions. Let me see.
I would like to ask a question.
Okay, yes, I was trying to find you. Yes, please, Antonio, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My question. Thank you very much for your explanation. But I'd like to ask you something in the technical area, if I may. I realize that you gather a lot of data from your explanations, and I was wondering how extent is your usage of digital twin technology to experiment before you go into the design phase and construction phase, since your equipments are very expensive, and I think given the fact that you are receiving data in real time from the track, I'm sure that using digital twins you can get an enormous advantage with respect to your competitors. So I'd like to hear you on that. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Antonio, for this question. Very, very, very good. So, well, do you want to make some comments to all these three topics, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Antonio, it's great to hear that final question. I'll come to that last because my background as an engineer was in PLM, so managing digital twin of the business. So I can hopefully share something there. The drivers, the public perception, you're in an organization that is in the spotlight. Millions of people are watching you. Even if you're one of the 90% of the team that never go to the racetrack, your organization is being portrayed by journalists, by fans, on social media, on the main sporting channels every weekend. And so it's very difficult for you as an individual in the team to not get distracted by what people are saying about your company and your team. Particularly then when the media jump on something a driver has said or someone important in the team. We're in a sport that most CEOs aren't public figures. We're in a sport where the CEOs are household names. Toto Wolff, Christian Horner, everyone knows these names. And so you have senior people in the team who are famous, and that draws a lot of attention. The challenge you have in a Formula One team is you have two drivers, and you have this conflict of interest where you have drivers who are racing in a drivers' championship. They are direct rivals. They are competing against each other with the same equipment, the same technology. But then you have that they have to come together to be part of a team so that you can compete against the other constructors. And so they have, the moment they put their crash helmet on, they have this dilemma. Am I racing with my counterpart for the good of the team, or am I racing to compete against my counterpart? And then that splits into the rest of the team because each driver has their own team of mechanics and engineers that work just with that one driver. So you have to be very careful that any conflict between the drivers doesn't expand to become a conflict within more of the team, and you end up with a huge division in your team's morale and culture. And I've seen that happen at times in the sport, and it's not pleasant. And it takes really strong leadership to prevent that or to correct that. So it is very much down to the way the leaders handle the image and the media intrusion and the fans intrusion to make sure that everyone stays aligned and stays focused and help keep that out of the team. It's why the teams will meet after every single race for a debrief, because it's a way of getting everyone back together, regrouping, getting our arms around everyone in the team and saying, look, ignore what's being said, ignore what's out there. We're tight, we're a unit, we stick together, and keeping that real team spirit. You have to keep, it's like the magicians that are spinning plates. You have to keep going back and spinning that plate. You can't just assume a culture is there and it will stay there. You have to keep correcting that and keep that energy in the team to keep everyone united. The study in the competition is interesting because I think, the summary is you keep one eye on the competition, but you have to have one eye on innovation. You have to be brave enough to lead the way. If I look at Red Bull as an example, the energy drink company that owned the racing team, they were first to market with an energy drink. They were brave enough to put that drink in a can that was a shape and size that had never been manufactured before. Vending machines couldn't dispense cans of Red Bull when it was first introduced to the market because they were a different size. They were not the conventional can size. That was because they had a motto of, we do things differently. We need to be different to stand out. And sometimes that takes risk, it takes bravery. There's a reason now that Red Bull are selling 6 or 7 billion cans a year because they were first to market. They were brave enough to do something different, and they stuck with it, and they trusted that approach. So I think, yes, look at the competition, understand what your rivals are doing, learn from their the things that they're doing better than you, but you have to be brave and bold to take creative, innovative decisions and lead the way. Otherwise, you will always follow them in the marketplace unless you've got other products. I'm saying this from a background of motorsport where it's a very binary sport. Yes. We have one product, we only make 2 of them, and we race them around a track every weekend. It's not as complex as almost all of your, if not all of your organizations here. The digital twin, I'm conscious of time for everyone, but to kind of wrap up, you're right. It's very expensive and time consuming to manufacture a new component for a race car. If you look at a front wing for a race car, there are at least 80 to 100 components that go into making a front wing on a race car. Red Bull Racing, when I worked there, we would have a new front wing design for almost every single racetrack. So that's 20 new front wings over the course of a season, at least. But they can take weeks to manufacture. A front wing is at least £250,000 of materials, development, manufacturing time. You don't want to spend that time and money making something that doesn't work. So to give you an idea of the importance of digital twin within an F1 team, and almost all of them are the same, every single part of the business has a digital twin, has a digital representative or representation. So I could speak to a designer, we could on a 3D CAD workstation design a new front wing design. That 3D model would go through aerodynamic simulation, through CFD, computational fluid dynamics, using high performance compute to simulate airflow over that piece of bodywork to understand its aerodynamic performance. At the same time, we would be simulating its strength, its deflection, its flexibility to make sure that it's strong enough to comply with the loads it will see. That's all happening digitally. We would then take that data and we would put that into our driver in the loop simulator. So think like a PlayStation on steroids, a physical driver simulator, like an aircraft simulator with a real driver pilot in there, driving the car around the next race's racetrack, with the car performing as though that front wing has been fitted, with all of the data from the simulation now impacting the driver's feel and the car's performance. If that data and that driver's feedback all aligns and gives us the outcomes that we're looking for, then we commit to manufacturing it. So the driver is essentially driving a new component around a racetrack before we've ever manufactured it, before we've committed to that expensive process. When we design the programs to machine the components, we run them through the digital twin first to make sure we are manufacturing this in the most efficient way, the fastest possible way with the best quality. Every single stage has a digital representative that can give us the outcomes we need. So what we're trying to do is know that when the car sits on the grid at the start of the race, the performance that we will expect from that car, we can predict through simulation before we ever get there. And we're looking for correlation between simulation and real car. And if we get that correlation correct, then we have even more confidence that the next design iteration is going to give us the outcomes we want or the outcomes we expect. One of the reasons Red Bull has so much success is they have their correlation, their simulation, their digital twin is so comprehensive and so accurate that they get great correlation with what goes on in simulation and what happens on the racetrack. And I think that's another part of the success. So yeah, I hope that's answered those 3 questions. But thank you. Great questions.
Okay, maybe we go to 3 more questions. Is it possible?
For me, yes.
Okay. 2 more questions, and then we try to close at 7:05. So I don't know, Vasco Teles, I know that you are very keen on Formula 1 and technology. Do you want to make some comments, some questions to Al, please?
Sure. Thanks, Jaime. And thanks again, Al, for your insights and experience. Pleasure. Yeah, right at the beginning, I had a question about, so you were at Williams, right on the last stage, but early on Jaguar, then Red Bull. And what was your thoughts on the evolving of the team and the increasing the dimension, the challenges in technology about it? And so first Stewart, then Jaguar, excuse me, then Red Bull, and now the big Red Bull. what are your thoughts on that? Thanks.
Okay, we have here a demanded question from João Luís Terraça. Please, João.
Hi, thank you, Jaime. Thank you all.
Pleasure.
I have a question which is we haven't discussed much about sponsorship. So the question is, we're talking about a lot of money from a lot of companies across the globe. So basically, how's the process? Because basically, how come you can identify that some company literally across the world that is looking for that wants to sponsorship you? And also, if you know, to which extent do you have all the teams are looking for the same sponsors? So to which extent are you competing, you know, like saying we're willing to give you more? So how does it work? And also in relation to the kind of sponsorship where you are involved in terms of your suppliers, to which extent are you the one selecting which suppliers you're going to need? Like you need Oracle, or is it Oracle that wants to work with you?
Okay. Now we have again Angel. Angel, do you want now to make a question or a comment, please?
Yes, a comment and a question.
Yes, please.
I'm paying attention, and once again, sorry for not assisting since the very beginning of this.
No problem.
Of this meeting. So I would like a few more comments. Look, we tend to look for sport and for automobile sport and Formula One in general in a romantic way. And as you were emphasizing during your interventions, that is not as romantic as we think. So share us a little bit more about processes, about discipline, about structured interactions, about teaming between teams, how things work between factory teams and teams on the track. And finally, just a curiosity, the role of the big magic guy in this process, that is Adrian Newey, being so many years leading and designing cars for wonderful teams and for your team right now.
Okay. Is there anyone that wants to make any question, any comment?
Just a very short comment.
Please.
Also taking on what Angel was saying about the team and the different roles.
Yes.
Al, you mentioned the pit stop team, and usually in my trainings that I do about digital transformation, I passed a video of a pit stop in 1950 or around 1951 or something like that. So it's a very well known video where three guys just slam on the tire and the pilot just drinking some, I don't know, whatever, but it takes like 1.5 minutes, and now it takes 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting about your saying that that's change, of course, and people are fear of change if they think they are going to lose something. But instead of having 2 or 3 guys just slamming on the tires on the wheel, we have now 20 persons with specific, very, very specific roles and very high level roles. And I think this is a very good parallel image that we can do to our companies when people are afraid of losing their jobs, but instead they can do a very more specific, more added value job like they do now on pit stop. Just a very comment on that, and totally agree. Yes. Thanks, Jaime, and thank you all.
So is there any comment anyone who wants to make? Paulo Faceira, Sérgio? Paulo, do you want to make any comment?
Just that was brilliant, just brilliant. It was completely out of the box, the presentation that you made. Astonished.
Very kind.
So much. Thank you so much. It was completely different, completely out of the box. Just that. Thank you, Jaime. Thank you.
It's very kind. Thank you.
So we have 8 minutes, so I think it's time for you making a final comment and final questions. You can share after the presentation. You told me, then I can share the presentation over. Thank you very much. Please.
Yes, no problem. So yeah, some more great questions. I'll be as quick as I can. So yes, I was around Red Bull Racing when it was Jaguar, so it was Ford owned. I think the biggest changes from Stewart Grand Prix through to Red Bull Racing is obviously the level of investment and the size of the team. So that comes with pros and cons. You know, keeping the team as a unit when you lose. You know, when I joined Jaguar Racing, I knew everyone's name in the team. As you get to close to 1,600 people at its peak, it's hard to know everyone's name. So it's more important than to really work hard and keep the team focused. The investment was different. What I noticed most interesting when Red Bull moved in, Jaguar was owned by Ford and didn't have a huge amount of success. And what we realized was that Jaguar was being run like a Ford Motor Company, very bureaucratic, very rigid, very strict, following lots of procedure in a sport that requires lots of agility and reactivity, and it just didn't seem to work. And I think that was perhaps one of the reasons they didn't have a great success. Red Bull came in as this crazy energy drink company that was shaking up the market, doing everything differently, and they ripped up the rule book. Unfortunately for Red Bull Racing at the start, that didn't work either. They went too far the other way. Rip up the process, let's just have fun. We had amazing parties, great fun, but we didn't win any races. And what they realized was we needed to find a middle ground where people could have fun. And I think what Red Bull have shown, even to this day, is that you're able to take the job seriously, but not yourself. You're able to be professional, be technically minded, be proficient, world champion, world class, and have fun doing it. You don't have to be serious and focused and regimented to do it. Every team has its own culture. I love the Red Bull Racing culture because it had that approach, and it proved it still worked. Lots of different ways to get to World Championship. Red Bull went there as a party team, and I think that was the biggest change, bringing in a new culture, bringing that Red Bull vibe. Sponsorship. The summary for sponsorship is it's as competitive off track as it is on track. So yes, we'd be hunting very similar sponsors. Every team wants to hunt down and partner with best in class. And so no surprises. You've got some sponsors who are being approached by many teams. So then it's, well, what can we offer differently to the next team? When you're winning championships and you're in a unique brand like Red Bull, it is easier to get the best sponsors. When you move to a team like Williams, and unfortunately when I was there, not winning very many races, if any, it's a bit more difficult to get sponsors. The easiest thing is reduce your price point. But what we started to do was realize there are things that you can't do when you're not winning races. You can't offer, champagne every race weekend for the sponsors and ability to have pictures with the trophy because you're not winning races. So we would flip the coin over and look at, well, okay, what can we do because we're not winning races? What can we offer the sponsors that the other teams can't? And things like better access. I was never able to take a sponsor into the driver simulator at Red Bull. It was so exclusive. There was so much IP there that it was a VIP experience to be allowed in there. At Williams, we could even get people sitting in the car in the simulator. We took them into the wind tunnel to see the latest designs in play because we were able to. We weren't winning races, so we were able to be more creative and offer more. So I think that creativity element, winning races on track's one thing, but it's just as competitive off, and you have to get creative with your sponsorship activations. F1, yeah, I always tell the great stories about F1. I always tell how cool it is. Netflix is really good at showing perhaps the behind the scenes and the more political side. I think it is, I think I've probably summed it up. Red Bull were really good at being able to get control, great process, quality, reliability, consistency, but do it with a culture of fun and keep that balance. And that's all down to leadership. It's all down to communication. It's all down to role modeling from the top level down. So yes, it's competitive. It's not for everyone. I think some people are either in it for life or they're in it for a year and realize, this is not quite for me. It's not for everyone. It's a very unique industry at times, but at the same time, it has lots of parallels with other industry. I probably haven't answered that one very well, but I did want to finish with with Adrian Newey because I'm in the business of teaching leadership now. We coach, we work with various people in different levels of leadership roles. Adrian Newey features in one of my few stories of great leadership in my experience. He's what he brought to the team, not only as an aerodynamics and F1 car design genius, and I don't throw that word around lightly, what he also brought was a confidence to the team, a different mindset to Red Bull. So Adrian joined Red Bull Racing in around 2005, 2006. And no surprise that by 2009, the teams were winning races regularly and winning world championships very soon after. He'd not only helped them develop a championship winning car aerodynamically, but he also changed a mindset within the team that instead of updating and developing the car, periodically throughout the season, we had a continual drive of development. Every single race, we will now put a new front wing on the car. We will design new components every single race, create this pace in the business that we didn't have before. That was him driving that pace. But he also arrived and everyone thought, we have an Adrian Newey in the team now. This is amazing. Brought a whole new dynamic and feel to the team because of his background, his gravitas, and that confidence allowed everyone to get creative, everyone to do more because they had the support of the amazing Adrian Newey. But he balanced that with, and still does, with an amazing calmness, an amazing presence. It's one of my favorite leadership experiences that I won't have time to go into now, but it will sit with me forever, of how he interacted with me at an event that he didn't need to. And he brought me in and he allowed me to have a part to play when everyone wanted to speak to Adrian Newey. And he allowed me to have a part of that. That took great presence of mind, great social skill and EQ to understand that, that was leadership. And so yeah, I have a lot of respect for Adrian Newey, and yeah, an absolute motorsport genius. Red Bull Racing were very smart in recruiting him early on. It's clearly paid off.
Oh, thank you very much. It was, I think, for everybody, a perfect lesson and a very good lesson. Thank you very much for all the participants. Have a nice East, and we will be next time. Thank you very much. Okay, bye bye.
Thank you, everyone. Lovely to meet you.
Bye.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.